Hello, everyone. Welcome to the WookieCast. Today we're here with Marc Guggenheim. Thank you so much for sitting down with us yet again.
Oh, no, it's fun. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
And this interview is kind of going over some of your more recent work with Star Wars Jedi Knight and the more recent, even more recent, Jar Jar one shot.
Yeah,
Um,
love it.
so we got some of the questions from some of Wikipedia's readers, and they were really curious what the I idea for the series centering on Corlys Wrath and his attempt to seek revenge on Qui-Gon came from.
Well, originally when Marvel and Lucasfilm came to me about Jedi Knights, my only remit was tell, stories about the Jedi, in the time before Phantom Menace. And I I hit upon this idea of, because I'm like, oh, well, which Jedi do I focus on? How do I choose? There's so many, and there's so many cool ones. I also knew I wanted to create some ones, of my own. So I thought, well, maybe the way to approach it is I'll pick all the Jedi, and have done in one issues where I'm telling complete stories with, sort of handpicked Jedi and going from issue to issue to issue, sort of like a TV show. But I feel like when TV shows do that, I happen to like the ones where there's also like some subplot that's running throughout. So even though you can pick up any issue, sort of out of order, there's still like for the people who like me like serialized storytelling have a bit of a you know have a bit of an ongoing thread to sort of tug on. And I knew that I wanted it to involve Qui-Gon. And the reason for that was really simple, which is Qui-Gon's going to be dead soon. You know, if, there's very few Jedi who sort of, who are around in that era who, aren't going to last at least until, episode three. So I really, wanted to, focus on Qui-Gon, and see, tell more stories about him before he meets his demise. And I was thinking, it sort of the idea sort of came to me really sort of thinking in terms of what Qui-Gon could have, learned, or what mistake could he have made back when he was a Padawan, especially since his master
Mhm.
was Count Dooku, who we know is not the best influence. So, um, sort of, from there, the Corlys Wrath storyline just sort of, slowly emerged as I tried to, really sort of figure out, what sort of, mistake that Qui-Gon could make that feels believable, but at the same time doesn't like, damage or is in,
Mhm.
in contradiction to what we know about him as a character.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, Corlys Wrath as a character is pretty interesting. What were some of your thoughts while developing just his personality and what he would be like, as that kind of antagonist almost?
Yeah, I was very interested in the way I pitched Corlys to Lucasfilm was if you look at the Jedi as samurai, what is a ninja?
Mm.
And I thought, oh, samurai versus ninja. That's an interesting matchup. That's a, that's going to make for some really good fight sequences. So really it was, me trying to, working with the artist Madabek Musabekov. How do we, bring in the Star Wars version of a ninja?
Mm. So is that kind of where the backstory of like the Banished came in, like creating a whole separate organization kind of thing?
Yeah, I didn't want to like, I didn't want to like touch on, like certainly had to avoid the Sith. There weren't any other, organizations that quite hit all the marks I needed to hit with the story
Mm.
that I had in mind, particularly this idea that there's this thing called the Crucible that like literally changes your physical appearance because I wanted Qui-Gon to originally be like, I don't know who this guy is. I've never met him before in my life. So that was it just it oftentimes I try to play around with all the clay that's already in the galaxy. But every now and again you've got to create some new clay.
Kind of more of a Wikipedian question, but given that some of the stuff with Wrath, well, occurred when Qui-Gon was a Padawan, when around in that Padawan ship do you kind of imagine that taking place? Because, there's Duke of Jedi Lost and some other stuff kind of showing that time frame.
Yeah, I kind of picture it. It's funny. Like, one thing working with Lucasfilm is they always prefer that I not get too specific about a time period. But if we're just speculating for the purpose of an interview, there's that episode of Tales of the Jedi with Qui-Gon as a Padawan and Dooku as his master, where you know Dooku does something that Qui-Gon disapproves of, and it's sort of the first inclination that Qui-Gon may may have a teacher who's teaching him the wrong things.
Hmm.
Um, I kind of picture the an initial encounter with the Banished to be like shortly after that experience. As he's like he still trusts Dooku, but Dooku has shown a little bit of his true colors.
Right, and that would have been like one of the first times that that true color was shown. So
Yeah.
after,
Yeah. Well,
interesting.
yeah, when I
Yeah.
gave when I scripted those flashbacks for Malbec, I specifically referenced that episode as like this is generally speaking the age that Qui-Gon and Dooku are in
And their
my
visual appearance, like age, that would make
exactly.
sense. Yeah. Um, Given the series was full of one-shot issues, were there any that you had ideas for that you wanted to do if you had had the space, or ones that you eventually ruled out after thinking about and were like, no, that wouldn't quite work?
There weren't any that I ruled out. I did have a lot more. I had a lot more ideas for stories beyond the 10 issues. I certainly wanted to. I also, one of the things I wanted to do if we had gotten more than 10 issues was revisit some storylines and
Mm.
revisit some concepts like Aether Prime, and what he's doing with all those creatures on his ship. Um, I had a whole sort of story, plotted out for that. Um, I had a couple of other, there were just, I had a couple of other stories and just a lot of other Jedi I wanted to, I wanted to touch on.
Were those other Jedi ones that you would have created, or just existing Jedi that you wanted to kind of weave into this storyline?
A mixture of both, a mixture of both.
I
And I
see.
also like wanted to be able to play, more with the Jedi that I had created, like Vecna Mooncrest, for example.
That leads very well into the next question. There's several of the Jedi that got introduced, including Mooncrest. Do you have a favorite out of the ones you created?
Yeah, Vecna's my favorite. I love her design. I love her spunk. I love the idea that, disabled people are getting represented in Star Wars. I like the fact that, her disability requires her to like have this, sort of very clear mental focus that can overcome the pain that her body is in. I just
Mm.
thought that was a very interesting Jedi problem to have.
Yeah, for sure, because you do have to go on missions and do
Yeah.
lots of things
Yeah.
while
And
dealing with that.
overcoming adversity, which I just thought really spoke to me, and it made for I think a very strong, fierce character.
Do you kind of have like a methodology for how you like name these characters, or any like Easter eggs and you like named one after a friend or something like that?
Marvel really frowns on that.
Oh, okay.
So and usually I can tell when I'm naming it after someone. Although it's funny, like there's two editors who have uh, worked on Marvel Star Wars books. One is Danny Chasm, and the other is Michael Basso. And I always thought Chasm Basso is like the most Star Wars name I've ever heard in my entire life, and they wouldn't let me use it. But it's funny. Like I thought, like I don't really have a methodology. I Although it's kind of funny, like I came up with the name Vecna Mooncrest, and I felt like Mooncrest just sort of came out of just my head. But then I was driving this very familiar route that I typically take to play tennis, and I saw that there's a street sign that's Mooncrest.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh my God, did I like see that and register it subliminally? And that's where I got the idea. But yeah, generally speaking, it's just these are just names. I also I keep a notebook of like potential names for things Star Wars and non-Star Wars related. Like if I, think of an interesting sounding name or an interesting sounding phrase or whatever, I I jot it down so that I've got a little bit of a well to go to when I have to name characters.
That makes a lot of sense. So you've perhaps used stuff from that workbench or workbook rather in the future,
Oh yeah,
maybe if you wrote it down ages ago. That's really interesting.
absolutely. Yeah.
Something so interesting about Star Wars is that everything sounds very Star Warsy instead of just
It-
being like a brown rat. It's
yeah,
something
yeah.
interesting type of
Yeah, I
rat.
feel like
So,
it sound like when it sounds Star Warsy,
yes.
you
Yes.
know when it sounds Star Warsy. And that's why I think like it's so interesting like that there's C-3PO and there's Luke Skywalker and there's all these interesting names and then there's Ben Kenobi. Just
Just Ben.
regular old Ben. So I try not to be like dogmatic. I'm like, every now and again you can use a real name, that still feels, you know, in keeping with canon.
Oh, for sure. Speaking of kind of like deep pulls, though, Eighth Prime was a rather obscure pull from Star Wars Legends.
Yes.
How did that come about? Like, d you probably were familiar with him from Legends and then pulled him in.
Yeah, basically, one thing that I'm always sort of thinking about when I do a Star Wars book is there's a lot of Legends material that's out there. And it's, it's not a question of like, don't invent something if there's a perfectly good character out there already. For the most part, it's me being sort of driven by nostalgia.
Mm.
And like the whole idea of sort of this, the saga continues, toy line with like a brand new storyline post Jedi and everything. Like this was even before the Timothy Zahn novels, and it was like really like the first, you know, time that like Star Wars was going to be essentially off the map,
Hmm.
and into brand new territory. And the idea that none of those toys ever got made or distributed, and really, I became fascinated just with the idea of the road not taken. Um, and I guess it's in my personality, like if it's a road not taken, that's the road I want to take.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's just all those creatures. I
Yeah.
mean, I know some of them, I believe some of them got written up by Wikipedians, but did you ever think about some of the names for some of those obscure creatures? Of the ones that
Oh, like the
I know
creatures
such,
that he creates.
yeah,
I think I had come up with there is a name for them. I thought it made it into the issue.
maybe I'm just
Let
misremembering,
me
but
I can quickly look it up. Let me quickly look it up for you. Because maybe it didn't, yeah, it's possible that I named it and it didn't make it into the actual script. That is more than possible. Um,
I know we ask this of some other authors as well when like, what's the name of that toque cat that you put in? There's always a
yeah.
name. So, um,
Normally like I try to name everything.
oh, it is. It's a Xerexi.
Zerexi, yes, thank
That's
you. Okay.
interesting.
Not crazy. Yeah.
Interesting.
Again, that was a name from my notebook. You know,
Oh,
so
kind of one question tied to that as well is Wikipedia has been helping with some of the astrographical placements. And so, where in the galaxy do you think Veros is? Outer Rim, unknown regions?
I think Outer Rim is my guess. That would be my guess. Certainly I think like my intention.
Cool. We've been collecting the notes as we try to place all of the
I love it.
planets, so very fun. And kind of moving on, issue four featured a handful of like bounty hunters and underworld characters, including Marshal Vecto and Phaedra, who you had introduced prior in a different series. What was it like to reuse them in kind of a different time frame?
It was a lot of fun. I gotta say, like, I mean, I loved Vancto and Phaedra a lot, particularly Phaedra. Like writing Phaedra is just I had a blast writing her, and I love the way her brain works, and she's thinking 20 moves ahead of the reader. And I'm trying to think of like what um what gave me the idea to sort of bring these characters back for a story. I think it probably started off with, you know, with a desire to like just tell a good old-fashioned crime story. with the
Mhm.
Jedi because the Jedi are there are a lot of different types of things and they accomplish a lot of different types of missions. But one of the important things is like they are police detectives. It's one of the things I really enjoyed about Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Like I love that whole sequence on Coruscant where
Mm.
they go into the bar and everything. It's like and they and that whole moment plays out like, oh, those are two cops who just flashed their badges. Um, and I wanted to like, just do a good old-fashioned crime story. And again, trying to sort of play with the clay that's already there, I realized I've already got this sort of master criminal in Phaedra. Wouldn't it be fun to to bring her back again. And then, of course, once I brought her back, I'm like, oh, I got to bring Marshall Vancto back.
Mm.
But I also, because this is, pre the events of Episode 2, I realized Jango Fett was a possibility, provided that,
He's not
Qui-Gon
elsewhere.
didn't cross paths. Yeah, that the Jedi any Jedi really didn't cross paths with him because he's not a known figure to the Jedi in Episode 2, but was able to sort of figure out a way to show him to the reader, but not show him to the Jedi.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure Lucasfilm is to help with making sure nothing collides like that.
Yeah,
Um,
they're great. They were totally open to like using Django. They were like, just you got to dance between the raindrops a little bit here, and I'm like, I'm always up for that.
yeah. It's really interesting when characters get reused like that, especially original ones, because they're kind of in a sense yours, to phrase
Yeah,
it like that.
no,
I mean, they could obviously be
yeah.
reused by other authors now, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's always fun when I mean it's always fun when you create a character that another writer uses.
Mhm.
That's always a blast. Like because their characters are kind of like your kids, and you just want to see them go off and do things on their own.
Yes, yes, for sure. Um, Kind of going into the Jar Jar one shot and everything. How did Ahmed come to be involved with co-writing? That must have been a fun process.
It was so much fun. I had a blast working with Ahmed. We basically, I think he predated my involvement. When Marvel
Mm.
reached out to me, they're like, "We're doing a Jar Jar one shot with Ahmed Best co-writing. Would you, partner up with him?" And I leapt at the opportunity. I happen to love Jar Jar as a character, and I really have a soft spot for characters who are much maligned. And the opportunity to like write something with another writer, number one, was very appealing, but also with another writer who really knows this character better than I ever could. That was really, really exciting to me. And Ahmed came to the table with some really phenomenal ideas,
Mm.
and a very clear vision of the type of story he wanted to tell. So I just sort of saw my job there to just, help, Ahmed achieve his vision.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, it's technically the second time you wrote Jar Jar because of
Yes,
that
yes.
short
Well, that was the
story.
other that was the other appeal. The very first Star Wars story I ever wrote was a Jar Jar Captain Rex story, and so this definitely felt like coming home. This felt like a real full circle moment, which was definitely part of the appeal for me.
Except this time Jar Jar was meant to be in the story, and last time it was a later
That's right.
edition.
Correct. Correct. It was like, hey, you're doing a Captain Rex story, but no, you're also doing Jar Jar. So it was fun. It was definitely fun to return to that character under these circumstances.
What was it kind of like including Keller and Beck then in this one shot? Because it's portrayed by the same actor in real
Yeah.
life, but obviously they can interact in universe and it's not a problem. So
No, no, that was the beauty part of it. It's funny, like I wrote the line that Palpatine says, I wrote the line like I see a lot of you in him and him in you.
Mhm.
And I when I wrote that in the script and I said I made a note to Ahmed, I'm like, Lucasfilm, generally speaking, doesn't like meta humor. So this probably won't fly. But it sailed right through.
Okay.
So I was quite happy. Yeah, I love the character of Kelleran Beck, and I love that Jon Favreau brought Ahmed back, as a different character and a really cool badass character who'd like is not silly. I loved I love any chance honestly to see Kelleran because I just think he's such an interesting Jedi.
There's so many interesting characters that got brought back because Mira Bridger was there as well, which is also a very interesting pull for the time period. Who came up with
Yes,
that
yes.
idea?
That was Pablo Hidalgo.
Oh,
So we Pablo is he has forgotten more about Star Wars than any of us will ever know. He is a one man Wookieepedia, and we basically we knew and this was Ahmed's idea. We knew we wanted um, what Kelleran and Jar Jar do in this story to have long-lasting repercussions for the basically the creation of the rebellion. And we asked, Pablo for, for some pitches because could we have come up with things on our own? Sure, but like the, you know, the what would actually fly with Story Group? We were like, let's just go straight to the source. Let's ask Story Group. And so Pablo suggested both the Bridger connection and the code crystals from Andor.
interesting. So trying to tie different pieces of media together. I guess it makes it me feel more cohesive for sure.
That's the thing. Like, I mean, that's my favorite part about working with Story Group because their job isn't just to be traffic cops and keep you from making continuity mistakes, though they're great at that. But they're also like it's their job to like, you know, weave all the different strands of the galactic tapestry together. And I think, whenever you can have one era talk to another, I just think it's cool. It makes the universe feel real and lived in to me.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of in the same vein, one Wikipedian had a question about the ship that Jar Jar uses in the comic, the Hablibber Duck, I
Yes.
believe. Was that
Yes.
intended to be the same ship as from The Mandalorian?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Such
Yes.
a
And
Wikipedian
the
question, so we can
intention was
merge the
to
pages.
actually name it. Which also again explains the line that Kelleran has, like I get to use the duck whenever I need to, because we know he's going to have a need around the events
Oh,
of episode 3.
that's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, all of those like kind of Easter egg references is as we try to put it together on the Wikipedia end for sure.
Well, that was definitely one of Ahmed's ideas.
Oh, the name of the ship.
Yeah, the name of the ship and clarifying that, doing our best to clarify that it's the same ship that Kelleran pilots in the Mandalorian episode.
Very interesting. Um, do you have any favorite Wikipedia articles? It's kind of an interesting question.
That's a good question. Well, I will say, I mean, the truth is, like with any sort of like, what's your favorite X? My name, my answer will change depending upon when you get me. But like, I was very, I relied heavily on the whole Aetha Prime, saga continues entries when I was writing it. Because you guys have a lot of really great things, really great elements to it.
It's really interesting. Um, I guess, and one other astrography question to follow up just at the tail end here. Um, have any idea where Veros might be in the galaxy?
Ooh, good
Because
question.
we are working with Jason Fry
Yeah,
on occasion to kind of place it, and so, you know.
yeah. I mean, not to keep using the same answer, but I sort of pictured it as more outer rim. Um, I think the reason I tend to like sort of locate planets in the outer rim is it's it feels most Star Warsy to me, right? Like, like you're used to worlds that aren't, quite so galactic core, that they feel a little more at being out on the frontier.
Mm.
Um, or maybe that's just my personal preference, it's the lover of Westerns in me, I guess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's for planet nerds, it's very interesting to try to place everything, see where it
Oh
all
yeah,
is on
no,
the map.
it's
So
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
often try like when I'm writing an issue and I create a planet, I often try in the script to like indicate where it is, either through like a what we call a legend or in dialogue, because I do whenever possible try to give some thought to that and make an informed decision.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, are you able to comment on any of your favorite moments working with the same artist for this whole series?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. So first of all, like it's such a it's such a it's such a privilege, and it's a rare privilege to be able to work with the same artist over the course of 10 issues. It's just not how comic books are produced these days. Most artists cannot produce a book a month, but Motabek could. And I also like want to give a shout out to Luis Guerrero, who's the colorist of Jedi Knights. We had the same team down to the letterer for all 10 issues. Again, very, very uncommon and special. For me, like my favorite moments, honestly, are Motabek's fight sequences.
Mm,
Um, you know, Starting with issue one, actually, like that original, Qui-Gon Corliss Wrath fight. It was Danny Chasm, the editor, who had the idea. Make it like, 9 panels, make it like 10 panels, really like, sort of use the comic book panels as the equivalent of editing a feature, editing live action, like where it's a lot of shots in quick succession. And you know, that's not a task you can really give to a lot of artists, particularly a lot of comic book artists who are used to doing action in as few panels as possible, so that those panels can be as big as possible. Like, and Matabek just, he choreographed all of that, and his style is so fluid. He
mm.
he does a great job of conveying motion, which is a really hard thing to do with static images. But he does an extremely great job of that.
I guess there's only so much direction the script can give then, because when trying to do the massive fight sequences, like,
Yeah, I try, it's fine. Like there are some writers who go like, and they fight. And I try not to be that, like, I try not to be that writer. I try to be like, okay, I'm going to suggest some things, so that the fight has a sense of back and forth, and that one panel sort of logically follows the next and is sort of in reaction to the one that came before it. But I always say to the artists that I work with, like, these are just suggestions. Like, you draw, the best version of what's in your head rather than the mediocre version of what's in mine.
it's a really interesting way to look at it. I guess one comic book a month, well, yeah, it must be a lot of work thinking about it. We don't often
It's
hear a lot about the behind the scenes of it, but
Yeah, it's amazing, like the amount of detail that that Matabek you know gives his art. All that detail is very time consuming. I think one of the things, as I recall, one of the things we did was I like wrote the first 4 or 5 issues before Malavek started drawing,
mm,
so that there was a deep supply of scripts,
mm.
so that he wasn't having to wait on me to be able to start. He could roll from one issue straight into the next, straight into the next.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, well, the series was absolutely lovely, and
Thank you.
hopefully you'll there will be more Star Wars for you in the future.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm waiting by my phone, Marvel.
If people would like to keep up with you and your future works, whether Star Wars or otherwise, where can they find you online?
I have a website, marcguggenheim.com, but the best place is my Substack. I do like a semi-weekly newsletter called Legal Dispatch, which you can find at marcguggenheim.substack.com. I'm also on Instagram at Marc Guggenheim and on Blue Sky at Marc Guggenheim.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Wikipedia always appreciates your time and everything
Oh,
that
it's always
you
fun
all
for me.
do.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you guys. I rely on Wikipedia quite a bit, as I'm writing Star Wars, so I appreciate it.